Assuming that there is a new government and a new prosecutor general, I am prepared to do a public signing of the commitment for the $1 billion.
And despite of the fact that we didn't have any corruption charges, we don't have any information about he doing something wrong, I especially asked him, no, it was the day before yesterday, I especially asked him to resign.
Congratulations on installing the new prosecutor general. It's going to be critical for him to work quickly to repair the damage Shokin did. And I'm a man of my word. And that now that the new prosecutor general's in place, we're ready to move forward in signing that new $1 billion loan guarantee.
Democrat presidential candidate and former Vice President Joe Biden finds himself in more hot water this week. Just confirmed, a Ukrainian court ordered Joe Biden to be formally listed in a criminal case. The crime? The alleged firing of Ukraine's former prosecutor general Viktor Shokin in exchange for dropping an investigation into Joe Biden's son, Hunter Biden, and the company for which he was a board member, Burisma Oil. Shokin formally called for an investigation into his firing back in February of 2020, claiming the Ukrainian government at the time relieved Shokin of his post in exchange for $1 billion in loan guarantees promised by Biden, a bribe Biden himself admitted to doing.
If the prosecutor's not fired, you're not getting the money. Well, son of a bitch. Got fired.
But at the time Shokin called for this case back in February, the courts listed one of the defendants as an unnamed American, an individual widely understood to be Joe Biden, Obama's Ukraine point man. But Biden was never formally named. Now, the courts have ruled it is improper to conceal Biden's name and that there is sufficient evidence to proceed with an investigation. The ruling cannot be appealed. Another key development in this story is the release of a series of telephone conversations that has garnered major questions. Andrei Derkach, a member of parliament in Ukraine, in a press conference Tuesday released what he says appear to be voice recordings of then Secretary of State John Kerry, Vice President Joe Biden, and then President of Ukraine Poroshenko, discussing the Burisma case and discussing the removal of Viktor Shokin. Neither Kerry, Biden, nor Poroshenko have affirmed the verity of these recordings. The recordings appear to have been leaked from government officials and whistleblowers, but are currently being verified. Ukrainian President Zelensky stated he anticipates more developments over the course of the summer and says the case could qualify as high treason. Candidate Biden has yet to respond to this latest development. Chanel Vian, One American News, the White House.
Breaking news on Joe Biden. Peter Doocy asking Joe Biden a moment ago about his son on stage in Wilmington, Delaware. If we've got the clip, go ahead and roll it. Here we go. First time we're watching it now.
Did Hunter Biden commit a crime? Have you spoken to your son, Mr. President-elect?
Proud of my son.
If you heard it there, he said, I'm proud of my son. Two questions. First one did not get an answer. Second one, I'm proud of my son. More on this in a moment.
And welcome back. This week, the Justice Department confirmed that Joe Biden's son, Hunter Biden, is being investigated in 2 states for his foreign business dealings and his tax affairs. For weeks, the mainstream media, months you could say, has been reluctant to share the details of this story, stating that it was instead a Russian disinformation campaign. However, Hunter Biden himself released a statement outlining some details about the investigation. And joining us now to discuss is Newsmax host Rob Schmidt, who just released an op-ed on this story. Hey, Rob, so what do you think?
Yeah, I just think it's incredible to watch how this has all come together. I mean, obviously, I got the op-ed up. I couldn't believe it when I saw this story pop up about, just validating everything that I think a lot of people knew. Everybody knew there was a lot of dirt there. There was a lot of smoke there. It seemed like it was a legitimate story, but the media went out of its way to take a story that had all the markings of something that was going to be big, of something that was legitimate. You had this laptop, which had pictures of Hunter Biden on it, and had a lot of other information. You had Tony Bobulinski, who was a fantastic witness, who made a lot of sense, who nobody denied. This is a guy that was working with the Bidens when they were doing this work in China. He said that Joe Biden was in on this, that Hunter was basically just, pulling money out of these countries, and Joe knew about it, and Joe was in on it. And everything kind of made sense. And then you have, I want to pull up the statement to take us back a couple months ago from NPR. This was the official position from National Public Radio on why they weren't going to report on this story. They basically said, we don't want to waste our time on stories that are not really stories. I mean, it was just astounding to see. The entirety of the mainstream media, this was their position on this thing, not because it wasn't a real story, but because they didn't want it to be a real story.
Aren't we finding out also that the Attorney General was aware of what's going on ahead of time? And,
yeah.
And that makes you wonder. Now, the Attorney General doesn't have to tell the president everything. We understand that. But it could have been an issue. It could have affected votes, right?
It could have affected votes. We don't have an explanation for why Bill Barr didn't say anything or why this never came out. It kind of takes you back to 2016, though, and James Comey with the decision about Hillary and that investigation. And maybe they just said, you know what, I don't want to get in the middle of something like this, or I have no idea. Maybe they hadn't looked at it thoroughly enough to determine whether or not Joe Biden could be implicated in it. And then it's, if you're going to do something that's damning to Hunter, you're going to hurt a presidential campaign in the process if you don't know that the candidate was involved. I have no idea. But it is interesting to know that it sounds like Barr has known since, I think, the spring. Yeah,
and it also doesn't seem to be that the media was too concerned about doing that to President Trump's children.
No, absolutely not. And I mean, that's the whole point is this. If you had 1/10 the story about Donald Trump, this explodes into a national story everywhere all the time in the weeks leading up to the election. But because it was about Joe Biden, I mean, the media all came together and just buried this thing as deep as they could. And it's astounding.
It's interesting. Yeah, what could happen, though, is there are some people saying there needs to be a special counsel to look into this. And that would mean, assuming Joe Biden takes the presidency, if that indeed is what happens, he could have a special counsel that exists. And if he were to come in and say, I'm going to close that down, people would say, well, what are you trying to hide?
Yeah, and that could certainly happen. I think a lot of people want to look into this. If the Republicans hold the Senate, I think you're going to see the Republicans looking into this as well. So that'll be curious to see. It's obviously not a great way, obviously, to start off a potential Biden presidency, which is under the cloud of investigation. And it's not only Hunter. I mean, there's 3 different states looking into not only Hunter Biden, but Joe's brother, James Biden, as well. And it's Delaware, Pennsylvania, and New York. It's a lot of investigating happening to this family right now. It looks really, really bad. And this is just the very beginning. If he gets the White House, he's not even in there yet.
Yeah, I'm trying to remember back. I think that there was someone, possibly President Trump, that was talking about investigations needing to be done about this very thing. And as a result, he was eventually impeached because of it.
Huge developments in the growing Hunter Biden scandal, and his father has some major explaining to do. The president-elect's son under federal investigation, and it involves a lot more than just his tax affairs, like Hunter claimed yesterday. Sources telling Fox News the probe started in 2018, and investigators are looking into suspicious money from foreign countries, including China. Pressure now building on Joe Biden to speak out publicly after repeatedly claiming that he and his son Hunter did nothing wrong.
This was the headline in Politico before the election. It said Hunter Biden's story is Russian disinformation, dozens of former intel officials say. Nothing to see here. Don't look at it. Well, guess what their headline is now? Look at this. Justice Department interest in Hunter Biden's covered more than taxes. Oh, apparently that's a big deal. But also, let's look at what NPR said. This is taxpayer-funded NPR. Why haven't you seen any stories from NPR about the NY Post's Hunter Biden story, and they go on to explain why they're ignoring it. But now here's what our taxpayer-funded media outlet is saying. President-elect Joe Biden's son, Hunter Biden, says he was recently informed that he's under federal investigation. By the way, this is the New York Post headline on October 15th that they were showing that NPR is referring to. Remember this one? Censored. This was the Post. Not only were other media outlets not picking it up, but Facebook and Twitter both blocked it.
President-elect's son saying, I learned yesterday for the first time that the U.S. Attorney's Office in Delaware advised my legal counsel also yesterday that they are investigating my tax affairs. We do not know what they are investigating. During the campaign, of course, much was made of his connections and business dealings with Ukraine and China. We don't know if they are focused on those. We do know, though, that the probe was disclosed just about 5 days before Joe Biden is expected to formally become the president-elect. He's all but that right now with the Electoral College meeting to settle the issue once and for all.
It's unbelievable. And one more for you. Please bear with me because I couldn't help myself. This was CNN. This is the esteemed Wolf Blitzer talking to Adam Schiff from California, who is the chairman of the Intel Committee. Take a listen.
Take a look at this picture of the president in the Oval Office holding up a copy of the New York Post touting this conspiracy theory. It's made its way all the way to the commander-in-chief with a big smile on his face.
No one has indicated of any consequence that anything was done wrong or illegally by me or by my son. My son has not made money in terms of this thing about, what are you talking about? China is a bunch of garbage. Nobody believes it. There's absolutely zero basis to the accusation that I acted any way inappropriately or that my son did. You know there's not one single bit of evidence, not one little tiny bit, to suggest anything done was wrong.
You know, Joe Biden in one of those debates said that my son Hunter has nothing to do with China. Nothing. Which now, clearly, that's not the case. And the media is acting as if they had no idea that this was happening. But unfortunately, that's not the case. National Review wrote this story. Check this out. October 29th, before the election, FBI investigating Hunter Biden for money laundering. It was out there. They chose not to run with this. But when it came to the Russian dossier, Tom, and I was there getting the phone calls saying, hey, we've got this unverified dossier. What's your comment on it? They had no problem running with that. But when these Hunter Biden stories come out, they ignored them because they didn't want to believe them. They didn't want their guy to lose.
But the liberal media and members of the other political party chose to dismiss our work. They even falsely claimed that our work was Russian disinformation. And I think they did this in order to protect leaders of the other party. So you can understand why I think it's very outrageous that the Fourth Estate would choose to ignore facts when they are uncovered by Republicans. Senator Johnson and I don't do oversight work just for the fun of it.
Effectively, the conflict of interest, right, with one being a politician and yet having family members that are involved in some affairs that might put a politician in a compromising position. This investigation, what we've learned, was going on back in 2018. And Hunter Biden allegedly just found out about it yesterday. So he tells us it likely was a covert operation. They may have been looking into, and again, this, by the way, I should emphasize, we don't know a whole lot yet, right? But nonetheless, what we do know is from that laptop, that now infamous laptop, right, that was discovered at the Delaware computer shop that had all of those emails between Hunter Biden, alleged emails, I guess I should still say, because he has not come out and actually confirmed that they are his. But nobody said they were made up either.